401ks, 403bs, IRAs, Roth IRAs. Yes, your retirement savings options can get confusing, but today I'm here to help. Hi everyone, I'm David Scranton. Choosing the right type of plan to help save and grow your money, yes, it's important, but it can also be a challenge. And today we're going to help you tackle that challenge in our show entitled Understanding Your Retirement Account Options. So specifically, we'll be covering the pros and cons of your 401k, simple IRAs versus Roth IRAs, 403bs, as well as other options, and other things to consider when preparing your accounts for retirement. So let's start with the most popular type of retirement account by far, which is a 401k. The 401k, and I'm assuming, of course, that you have one. Why? Because about 60 million Americans do. In fact, it makes it the most popular option for American workers. And I think there are several reasons for that. First, it's really an easy option if your employer offers it. Second, as most of you know, a 401k provides tax advantages, including reducing your taxable income in the year you make the contribution. In addition to that, though, the money in your 401k grows tax deferred until you withdraw it, which the government requires you to do each year starting at age 72. And third, your employer matches your 401k in many cases. It matches your contributions. And your contribution limits are relatively high. So those are some of the main benefits of a 401k. But the question becomes, what are the drawbacks? Well, the first drawback involves the process of vesting, which means you may only earn your employer's contributed portion, that is the match, over the course of several years. And if you leave the company before you're, quote, fully vested, you'll keep all of your contributions, but you might only get a portion of your employer's match. The second drawback is that your investment choices can be limited. Your money is typically put to work for you within a narrow range of more growth-oriented investment vehicles, typically mutual funds. And that can mean that your account is highly vulnerable to stock market volatility. Now, let's talk about two other popular options and how they compare: the traditional IRA and the Roth IRA. The traditional IRA, individual retirement account, is what it stands for, is a tax-advantaged savings plan available to anyone and managed by the individual. So the benefits include, first, almost anyone with income can open and contribute to a traditional IRA, so it can be a good choice if you don't have access to a 401k. Second, the tax rules and advantages of a traditional IRA can be similar to those of a 401k if your earned income is below a certain threshold. And three, you have more investment options in an IRA than you do with a 401k. So what's the drawback? Well, the biggest drawback of a traditional IRA is that your contributions are not matched by your employer, and your contribution limits are lower. And also, if you have access to a traditional retirement plan like a 401k and your income's over certain thresholds, then your contributions are made on an after-tax basis. So how does a traditional IRA differ from a Roth IRA? And in doing this, I'm going to assume that your traditional IRA allows you to make a pre-tax contribution. But if you get that pre-tax, that means when you pull money out in a traditional IRA, you have to pay tax on 100% of your withdrawal. Think of a Roth IRA, though, as just the opposite. Why? Because you pay taxes on the money you contribute. So essentially, you're contributing after-tax dollars. But then you can withdraw it and all of your interest tax-free at retirement. Now that we've covered the most basic choices, let's take a look at 5 other choices that are specifically designed for various employment situations. The first 3 are all very similar to traditional 401ks. One is a solo 401k. This is designed for a business owner, an individual, self-employed person, really, that doesn't have any employees. Number 2, a 403b, which you're eligible for if you work for a nonprofit or a tax-exempt organization, typically teachers and medical professionals. Number 3 is a 457 plan, which is an option offered through state and local governments. Number 4 is a simple IRA. It's an acronym for Savings Incentive Match Plan for Employees. It's designed mainly for smaller businesses with 100 or fewer employees. And number 5 is a SEP IRA, which stands for a Simplified Employee Pension. This is a specialized IRA used mainly by self-employed people or by business owners. While each of these options I've talked about differ in some ways, all of them offer a variety of tax benefits and other government-sponsored incentives to encourage you to save for retirement. Why? Because Uncle Sam really wants you to save as much as you can for retirement so that you're not reliant on the government beyond the basics of Social Security. And that's why Uncle Sam lets you grow your money tax-free through most of these accounts, letting you make pre-tax contributions in many cases, and also letting your earnings grow tax-deferred. But again, it's not tax-free unless you're in a Roth IRA. Why? Because as I've noted before, the government makes you start taking money out of virtually all of these accounts and start to pay taxes on those withdrawals once you reach the age of 72. These are called required minimum distributions, or RMDs. Because once you're nearing retirement age, in fact, it's actually time to start thinking about how you're going to take withdrawals, if you're just going to take the RMDs or you're going to take withdrawals a little earlier, and also planning to do anything you can to maximize the tax burden from these withdrawals. Okay? And perhaps most importantly, you need to start thinking about how to satisfy these required minimum distributions in a way that does not jeopardize your entire savings. Because if your strategy involves satisfying these RMDs, these withdrawals, by taking systematic withdrawals from your IRA, from things like mutual funds or most growth stock portfolios, then you're essentially taking principal, and you run the risk of spending down your principal. Under certain market conditions, you could actually end up cannibalizing your account and ultimately running out of income altogether. The better strategy, in my experience, is to create an allocation within 5 to 10 years of retirement, or if not earlier, that will allow you to satisfy your RMDs from interest and dividends without touching your principal. In fact, this is one of the cornerstones of the investing for income model, and it can be done in a way that also helps you prepare for all the other financial challenges that you face in retirement. So let's bring in our guest, Brad Williams, president of Brad Williams Financial Services, a retirement income store located in Huntsville, Alabama. Brad, as usual, great to have you here.
It's great to be here, Dave. I appreciate you having me on your show.
So Brad, do you find that most people understand most of the investment options in their 401k?
Actually, Dave, no, I don't. A lot of them don't even realize what they have in it. They haven't touched it in a long time. If they're 55, 60, many of them are in the same investments they were when they were 35 and 40. They just never changed it. Or they fell into that ease of using the lifestyle or the target date fund. And when you ask them what's in it, they really don't know. And so one thing they're hoping to get from the meeting is a little more understanding of what they've been doing on their own. And that's pretty common.
It's funny, I found that a lot of times back in the days when people couldn't change allocations every day, they can only change them once in a quarter, and you have a quarterly 401k meeting. I found that most of the time people would simply just find the funds that had the best performance in the last quarter, and they'd move all their money into those funds. But sometimes that means you're buying high, which obviously is the opposite of what you want to do, right?
Yeah, and there's been some studies, I remember, hadn't looked at them in a while, that if you pick the top funds on Money Magazine for the previous year, most of the time they're not on the magazine that year. So everything changes.
Yeah, that's right. Things go through cycles for sure. Or my favorite one is they just, talk to their friend in the lunchroom and, hey, what are you invested in? Okay, I'm gonna invest in the same thing. So let's broaden it up just a little bit. In general, what types of questions you typically get, or maybe what types of sources of confusion do you see that people have about 401ks and maybe about IRAs in general?
Well, I think a lot of the confusion is what's the difference between a Roth and a traditional, and what does that mean to them? And the fact that a lot of people don't realize that that you can have other investments than mutual funds in an IRA. They think that's what they're stuck with. And because they've used that in their 401k. So a lot of enlightening I do with people when we first start working together is there is a universe of other options other than mutual funds.
Yeah, that's right. They're so used to mutual funds in the 401k, they think that's it. And once you get to the IRA world, it completely opens up. So are people generally trying to maximize the benefits they get from a 401k? So are they maximizing the matching that you see? Or are you finding, like I do, that a lot of people don't maximize that free money that they probably should be?
I do find that, although I'm seeing that less and less, what I'm seeing is they'll invest right up to the matching, whatever that may be for their particular company, but no more, because they don't realize they're getting a tax benefit in deferral for doing it. And so they're asking for other investment choices. And, you know, when you point out to them that, hey, you could be getting a nice tax break, at least for now, by putting more in your 401k. I think one of the big things is I deal with federal employees a lot and introducing them to the Roth option. And more 401ks are having a Roth option. And when they get close to retirement, shifting some or all of that contribution to that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it very well can. And, you know, it's interesting because you're right. If you're in, let's say, a 33% top tax bracket between state and federal, essentially you're getting a 50 cent on a dollar match up by the IRS, because, you know, putting a dollar in the plan means your take-home pay only gets reduced by 67 cents, but yet the full dollar is going in the plan, you know, and that's a 50% match. So what are some of the excuses that you hear from people, Brad, as to why they don't maximize, whether they don't maximize the match, or maybe they don't maximize the pre-tax ability to contribute?
They don't realize that the impact of their take-home pay is not as great as they think it is. And when you point that out to them, that even though they're going to be investing a dollar, they're really only going to see a certain percent decrease in their take-home pay because they're not having taxes taken out.
It's funny because,
you know, I was
going to say, it's funny, Brad, because some people think they just can't afford to do it. But the funny thing is, you know, when it gets taken out of your paycheck, for most people, you could take out more, and yeah, your take-home pay is going to get reduced, but you're going to make do, because it's the old adage, you know, save first for your future, and then you spend the rest with a clear conscience. But why do you find that maybe this generation doesn't do that as aggressively as maybe, you know, our generation?
I think a lot of it is education from the parents. They weren't taught to pay themselves first, and that's important. And so educating them on that and encouraging them to educate their children in the same manner.
Now, switching gears for a second, it's interesting because when markets were going up, you know, they hit the low March or April of 2020, you know, when the pandemic first came out, and then they recovered by August, and, you know, they were going up right through the end of last year. People are pretty calm about things, but you find that people are more concerned about their 401ks and IRAs and the like now, given that the markets have been a little bit more volatile?
What's interesting is I think I'm sensing more concern now than after the big drop in the pandemic. The big drop in the pandemic, they could point their finger to this unprecedented event that happened. And so everyone else was experiencing it. And now, as they're seeing inflation kick in and fuel prices and grocery prices and uncertainty overseas and a very volatile stock market, they're starting to look inwardly to themselves and not what all the buddies at work are talking about. And they're starting to focus on, okay, what does this mean to me? And I'm not sure what to do about
it. Yeah. And one of the solutions for that, as you know, is making sure that you make that transition from more of a total return thinking or growth thinking to more of an income-based thinking, focusing on interest and dividends within 10 years or so of retirement. So what do people need to know about converting to more of an income strategy with their 401ks and IRAs as they're starting to get ready to do this?
Well, I think going back to one of the original questions you asked me about 401ks is that if they're over 59 and a half, if they've got 401k sitting in a previous employer plan, that now's the time to look at the options outside of those old mutual funds that they've been stuck with to invest in a individual portfolio of income producing securities and what that can do for them.
Yeah, and simply, it's real simple, right? If you're retired or you're over a certain age limit, like you said, and can take in-service rollovers, you can move it to an IRA and you can invest in just about anything. Because
that's right, and a lot of people don't realize they can do that.
Yeah, because most 401ks, like we talked about earlier, you're right, they don't have income-generating options. They have primarily growth options because, they want to attract, 401ks are there to attract and retain young people, right? And, they're not hiring 60-year-olds, generally speaking. They're hiring younger folks who want more growth-oriented options. So I think they purposely make it attractive for them. So.
Yeah, and just like some of the benefits they have, like group life insurance, that's really tailored towards the younger employees. Well, many of the choices in their 401k fall into the same camp. Is they're really in the G, they're for growth. They're really not for income, and that's where they need to be focusing.
Very true. Very true. Brad, great words of wisdom as usual. Great having you here. Thank you. Brad Williams from Huntsville, Alabama.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you for watching today's video, Understanding Your Retirement Account Options. If you enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up button, to give us a like, and make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel for new content each and every week.